Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Happiness seems to be one of those most elusive qualities that many of us try to seek and try to maintain at a very consistent basis. We're also in very trying times. Why, with the new election year, we're trying to wonder whether or not we're going to see things such as jobs return and prosperity come into our pockets. We always try to find happiness. We try to find it in every way, shape, and form that we can outside of ourselves. But what does it mean when we finally turn that radar where we search for that bleep on the horizon to bring happiness to us, that we can find something that's a little more long-lasting? On the program today, we're going to be talking about a book called Deep Happy. And our guest today has more than 35 years of clinical experience, and he uses many forms of healing, things such as Chinese acupuncture, quantum science, and modern neuro and biological processes. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest and author of Deep Happy, Mr. Peter Fairfield. Peter, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Well, hi, Daniel. It's good to be there. I spent a number of years in Portland and that area a while back, and so it's good to at least to be channeling Portland, as they say.
Now, you've been all over the place. There's no doubt about that, including places like, China and even into the Himalayas, where a lot of people have certainly heard about Tibetan monks, for instance. Where would you say Deep Happy has been the most prosperous, for lack of a better word, in your experience?
Well, Deep Happy is a sense of being in your core. And the Eastern religions, at least outwardly, talk about finding your true nature. And so, a lot of my research, a lot of my influence, really, I have to say, comes from the East. I've been an acupuncturist for 40 years, and I had a clinic in the Himalayas for about 7 years and did long retreats in the Buddhist, Taoist, Qigong traditions, both in the Himalayas and in China and other places, India. And so really my ideas and my experience of Deep Happy came from some of that, although I had some earlier experiences as a child. Should I tell you about that?
Absolutely, please. We're looking for Deep Happy here through your experience.
Okay. Well, and I do want to say that the whole idea of Deep Happy is, I think, different from what I've found in the other happy books. When I wrote this, I didn't realize that there was sort of a happy book movement out there. This was just an idea I had, and I did it, and I had a publisher that encouraged me. But Deep Happy is the place that's inside us that's already happy. It's a place that is deep within all life, and we don't have to buy anything or get anything or add anything. We just have to uncover the resistance we have to experiencing. So that's a basic premise for Deep Happy. When I was about 8 or 9, somebody told me about the idea of infinity, and they described it as a place that didn't begin or end, went on forever. And I just couldn't imagine that. I said, wow, what is that? How could something not begin or end? And it really puzzled me. Here's a concept, and yet I had no idea what it really meant. So for some strange reason, I didn't realize it was weird for an 8 or 9-year-old to do that. I started to think about it, and I decided that I would try to experience infinity. So I really don't remember exactly how often I did it, but frequently I would close my eyes and just wherever I was when I think about it, I would try to go to the place that didn't begin or end. And after a few months of trying that intermittently, one day I got there. I got to the place that didn't begin or end. And I went, oh, this place. Oh yeah, I remember this. Those are my words, but as I was young, I'm not quite sure what I meant by remember it. Later on, I found out. Later on, when I was in my 30s doing long retreats in the Himalayas, I realized that had been a bridge, to somewhere else that connected me to another experience that I had. Mm-hmm. So that always taught me that there is a place that we can connect to that's always okay. And, like many people, when I was in my teens, I started to realize I needed more meaning. I needed something that meant something. I had some experience with religion, and I had felt something there. I spent a lot of time looking in philosophy and psychology, and I didn't quite have what I was looking for. I couldn't feel it. It wasn't alive to me. I spent a lot of time in the late 60s and early 70s exploring psychedelics and sex and those things. I spent a lot of time making sure that that wasn't quite it. It wasn't really. But also around that time I started to learn to meditate, and I started to become more familiar with some of the outward spiritual practices and techniques. I lived in a number of ashrams and spiritual communities, and really spent a lot of time practicing a lot of the spiritual disciplines. And then I got into healing, and I began to look at the physiology of these things. So it's been a progression.
Now, it's really interesting because we tend to get into a habit of searching outside of ourselves for happiness, that when we get this thing or we achieve this particular endeavor or meet a goal, whatever it is, that will make us happy. But I think anybody who's experienced this particular process finds that not only, it gives you happiness, but it isn't sustaining. And it's certainly, I would think, and it's just a guess, and you can certainly, from your experience, tell me, what it's been like for you in working with people, but it sometimes is those spontaneous things that hit you that tend to make you seem the happiest, like that unexpected thing. Do you know what I'm talking about there, kind of?
Yeah, exactly. So let me take the first part.
It's sort of like what I'm saying, and I can tell. When you plan for that thing that you think is going to make you happy, it could be getting married to somebody, whatever it is, a job, winning the lottery, whatever you want to call it, you get pretty happy. But it's that spontaneous, unexpected thing that comes where it's almost like, I wanted this in my life, but I kind of put it on the back burner, and then it just happened miraculously, and you go, wow, and you were really happy. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, actually, you're talking about three different things. So let me see if I can break that down and reinterpret what I think you were talking about.
Okay.
There's a basic level, of just basic happiness. We get a new car, we get a relationship, we see a good movie, have a good meal, win an argument, something. And we go, oh, I'm happy. Mm-hmm. But then that kind of thing, it's sort of superficial, and it comes and goes. You get a new car, it can get a scratch, or then you have to pay for it, or whatever it is. And then there's a deeper kind of experiential happiness where something really from us gets expressed. Maybe we write a song, or we meet our love, or, as you say, some unfulfilled desire happens. So there's a lot of pent-up hoping for something. So there's a lot more energy to get it, and it seems fulfilling, and it seems deeper, and it is. And we want all of those kind of happinesses we can have. But as soon as we strive for things, or as we strive for attainable experiences, then we're into striving. Now, the Buddha said life is suffering. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't ever have a good day or we won't. It just means that when we put our tire wagon, in a sense, to things that can come and go, things that are finite, things come and go. But what I'm talking about in Deep Happy, and a lot of other people talked about, and a lot of other words, is that there is a place inside us that doesn't change. Mm-hmm. I call it Deep Happy because it's simple, and it is happy, and it is deep. But it's a place that no matter what's happening outside us, we can still feel it. Now, about a year and a half ago, when I sent my final manuscript for Deep Happy into the publisher, I think it was that day or the next day, I got a letter from the IRS saying I owed $78,000. Mm-hmm. For a couple of years that I didn't really make that much money. Right. And so it was a real final exam for me on what Deep Happy was, and could I really walk my talk. And what I found was, even though I could become upset and worried and go through all the superficial things of concern about this situation, there was a part of me, the Deep Happy part of me, that was just fine. Mm-hmm. And if I rested in the Deep Happy part and I didn't lose my connection to that place, the core inside me, then it became more an idea of being curious about how things would work out, or curious about, how I would deal with the situation. So I didn't have to have an artificial happiness outside. I could really experience the ebb and flow of reality and events and experiences in the world. But yet inside, I could feel this place that was okay. Mm-hmm. And from that place is where also we connect to the living universe. So that's also a place we get information and guidance.
Now, did that ever resolve itself?
Yes, after 6 months of negotiating, I didn't owe him a penny.
Isn't that interesting how sometimes when something like that happens to a person, that it can really wipe them out? I mean, their mind really is everywhere else, and yet that moment is in front of them, and there's always the solution, if you're patient and you pay attention and you ask for it. And like you said, when you can be into that place where you're not moved by that one way or the other, that it just is, and you still go about your day, it exists, but it's on the back burner. You're not thinking about it in such a way that you draw so much energy that it consumes your day, that you're making decisions based on this thing that happens, like, for instance, you with the IRS. And it's really quite amazing, but so many people tend to sleepwalk like that. What do you think, really, especially in the Western world, causes this so much?
Well, because we have patterns of denial. We're not hunters living in the jungle where every nerve is attuned to sounds and tactile sensations, and our food and our welfare and our survival depends on it. Most of us have very sophisticated, buffered lives. We learn not to feel things. We learn to misinterpret things. We learn to shut off intelligences, knowledge, and feelings really from inside the womb. Many families have styles of emotional containment. Some families are angry, but they don't feel gentleness. Some families are gentle, but they don't feel anger. Some people just, have a big piece of chocolate cake every time there's an emotion comes up. All kinds of stuff. This is really what the world is about, mostly, is about things that keep us busy while the real stuff happens. And so most of us, and I've been an acupuncturist and a clinician for over 40 years, and so, what I see as the cause of diseases and illness and unhappiness is how we disconnect from parts of ourselves, from our heart, from our stomach, from our feeling sense. And so I'm just actually writing an article on this today. It's going to be a magazine up in Portland in a couple of weeks. It's about all that our body has to tell us. Our body can tell us exactly what to eat. We can go to the store at Whole Foods. We can see 14 vitamin C's. Our body can tell us if we need any of them and which one we need and what the dose is. Our body can tell us if somebody's disconnected from their feelings or being dishonest. It's actually quite useful in the political things that's going on right now. So it's because as sophisticated people living in the world where we have to contain ourselves, often in offices or jobs or in our families, and we, for some reason we learn that it's not safe to feel what our body is telling us. And happiness is a body sensation. Emotions are actually a body sensation. One of the great misunderstandings of modern medicine and healthcare and psychological care is that emotions are ethereal or even in the brain. They're registered in the brain. But all the Asian religions all the Asian medical systems show clearly that there's a relationship between the emotions and the felt senses to our body. And the older European medical traditions say that as well. The body is paramount. And so when we wake up in our body, we begin to feel what the body tells us. And so there's a superficial communication of this feels good, this doesn't feel right. We can feel our stomach, we feel our chest, we feel various parts of our body that are communicating. But deep to that is this deeper core of our being, and that's where deep happens. And that always feels okay.
Now, it's really, I think, wonderful when you can be in this place because we tend to hear stories of miracles, and I think, especially in the United States, that people can tend to feel cynical about anything good ever really happening. Well, that's fine, that happened to them, but it never happens to me, And that when you can be in the place, as you describe in your book, of deep happy, where you're pretty much content. In other words, there was something I had read not too long ago that says there's your perception of the experience of the way that it is. When you change your perception, you change the experience of what that is. And pretty soon you change your perception to a point where you're okay no matter what it is. And I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Just like what you were talking about with your IRS auditor situation. You know, here this bill comes in the mail. At first you feel a sense of initial shock. Ooh, where did this come from? But then because you're in a place, Peter, that you describe as deep happy, you become more intrigued. You don't look and say, well, those rotten son of a guns, boy, they're out to get us. And then pretty soon,
well, I did
that
say
domino
that.
effect.
I did have a stage of saying that.
Oh, I'm sure you did. But, you know, for some people, you know, it would last for long or for quite a long time. It would permeate and affect everything, I would think, going on with them. But I would think that you also probably came to a place where you became curious, said, you know, let's take a look at this. They're not the enemy. This is just something. This is what it is. Let's just take a look at it and go from there. And I think that's probably true for anybody who can get to a deep, happy place that you're talking about, is that you begin to see these problems or these challenges as just more curiosities after a while. Is that kind of how it gets?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, you know, everybody, I hear this a fair amount. Oh, how do I know it's real? It won't happen to me. I've never had those experiences. Well, if you can feel your hand, if you can scratch your forehead with your finger, you can find deep happiness. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have fingers and you don't have a hand, if you just blink your eyes, you know, you'll know that there's body sensation somewhere. And if you can't blink your eyes, it's probably not going to work for you anyway, because you don't have enough left, but you have a consciousness left. So this is a body thing. So anybody can do this, and it's just a matter, you know, you just simply start by breathing into your lower abdomen. And some people say, well, I can't feel anything. But, you know, put your hand on it. Feel the hand going up and down. And pretty soon you begin to feel your hand on the abdomen. Pretty soon you begin to feel sensations in there. Pretty soon you get this relaxing feeling, because when we do low abdominal breathing, it switches us from a stressed part of our nervous system or an action-oriented part of our nervous system to a relaxed, integrated, and healing part of our nervous system, just by breathing in our tummy. You know, most of the, you know, we take Prozac, you know, to keep serotonin in the system, but most of the serotonin in the body is actually made in the gut. So as we inhale and exhale and just relax and switch our nervous function, we begin to integrate. And once we begin to integrate, then we begin to get how we feel. We begin to know how we feel. And first we begin to know how we feel superficially, and then gradually we get that there's something deeper that's happening, and it's really okay. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm talking about.
Now, in what you have discovered over the years of being in the East and also bringing together Western thought with this, describe a couple of the exercises that our readers can take from here today that they can begin on to achieve or at least recognize what deep happy feels like or is.
Well, and that's kind of what I started with a moment ago. When we actually feel our tummy, you know, when we begin to do the low abdominal breathing, it sounds very familiar. But what makes it a little different is not trying to do anything, just begin to feel the breath expanding and relaxing in the tummy. A lot of people breathe backwards because they're stressed, so you want to make sure in the beginning when you inhale, you feel the lower tummy come out. And this is, you know, the area below the belly button. And as you inhale, it should come out. As you exhale, it should come back in. If you're breathing backwards, you know, just take a few moments and just practice until when you inhale, the tummy comes in and out. You know, about 30% of the people breathe backwards from stress. And then once you begin to feel the tummy, just relax and begin to feel it coming in and out, and you can kind of dissolve into this oceanic feeling, like the ebb and flow of the waves, just coming in and out. Don't try to change anything. Don't try to go fast or slow. But just notice what you feel. And then pretty soon you'll begin to feel the sensations inside the abdomen. You know, we have the ability to feel any of the parts of the body. There's over 100 trillion cells in the body. And they're all connected to the whole by resonance. I mean, there's nerves and blood and everything, but there's also a resonance. And we have glial cells in the brain and glial cells in the heart that actually feel the resonance of the whole body. So we have the ability to really feel any cell in any system in the body. So, but since most of us are turned off or disconnected from these sensations, it may take us a few minutes or a few days of trying just to begin to notice things. But any little tiny sensation, any little dot of sensation is a window or a door to go right in. Now, sometimes if you're breathing into an area, you can't feel anything. But so if you keep your awareness at the three-dimensional location, like say in your lower abdomen, And as you breathe in and out, pretty soon you might feel maybe a vague feeling or a numb feeling or an achy feeling or a sharp feeling. That's the beginning. And there's nothing to be, if you feel a sharp feeling, there's nothing to be alarmed about because it's something that just woke up. You didn't just become sharp. It's been sharp and then your body got numb to it. It just means there's a place in your body that's tense and tight. And so as we just do the breathing in and out, we become familiar with the vocabulary of sensations in the body. And as we begin to apply this process to anywhere in the body, what happens is we begin to sense the whole sensory mechanism of the body. The body is telling us all kinds of things all the time. So that's a practice. And then another way to begin to find a place of deep happy is to begin to notice if you go back in your life to, say, when you're 3 or 6 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 or 30, you may think of days when you were feeling pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed is that there's a part of me that has never changed. I'm 63, I'm definitely over 50, and I don't look quite like I did a few years ago or a long number of years ago. But there's a part of me that does not feel any different. There's a part of me that's the same Peter Fairfield I was when I was 2 and 10 and so forth. And so when we begin to identify the us that has never changed, that's the beginning of that feeling of deep happy, because that's a part of us that's aware and awake without the body. And so those are 2 exercises. Begin to have a body awareness. Notice how your body feels. Begin to notice things. Like when you're in a restaurant, and you look at a menu for foods and so forth. Our head can go, oh, that has too much fat, or oh, I shouldn't eat that, or oh, I really want to eat that. Or you can go, oh yeah, triple macaroni and cheese, extra large, please. But if you actually tune into your diaphragm and your upper abdominal area, you notice that with every food you think about or smell, there's a slight sensation there. It's basically a yay or a nay. You may not hear those words, although some people will, but there'll be like an open feeling and a closed feeling. And you'll interpret that response differently. But every time you think of a food, your digestive system in the upper abdomen will actually give you a feeling whether it likes it. And if you can slow down enough, your body will tell you exactly how much to eat. It's amazing. If you've ever had a bite of Haagen-Dazs or some very rich dessert, you take a bite and perhaps the first bite tastes amazing. It's almost like a drug. But then the second bite doesn't quite taste as good. The third bite actually doesn't have so much taste. And if we go farther and farther, we realize that we're not eating for taste or nutrition. We're eating to numb us out.
Mm-hmm.
So our body gives us very clear and exact information on how that works. It works in relationships. It works when people are lying or not telling the truth. Or if we feel comfortable in a room or we don't feel comfortable. These are body sensations. Our body's telling us this all the time.
I think it's interesting when you talk about, our bodies and communicating with us. When you were talking about the Haagen-Dazs ice cream, the first bite is fantastic after that. And then pretty soon you satiate yourself to a point where you're just kind of eating it because it makes you feel more comfortable. And if you think about yourself out driving through the course of the day, it could be around your neighborhood or area, whatever the case is, and you take a look at all of the fast food places, where all of a sudden you say to yourself, geez, I need to go and get something to eat. You're really not hungry, but I think that it's interesting how those seem to be set up in such a way that there's a certain subtle anxiety that I think that you're trying to soothe by going through a drive-through, or that feeling we need to go get something to eat, but you're really not hungry. That's the funny part. And you'll eat anyway. And then you take a look at the obesity problem that Americans have, and you realize, that they say, well, this is mostly due to diet. Well, what do you think, or what do you say to the idea that it could be because they've tried to soothe a constant anxiety that they may be feeling?
Well, that's it. The problem with obesity is not the food. The problem with obesity is people feel overwhelmed, they feel unloved, they feel put upon, they feel afraid,
mm-hmm.
they feel ungrounded, and all those kinds of feelings. And so people eat for all kinds of reasons, not necessarily for nutrition. if you're revved up
and not because they're hungry, of course.
Right. Well, but it's a gnawing hunger that says,
right.
feed me or get love or I don't feel safe. I need to feel grounded. I need to feel in my body. I feel overwhelmed. I feel disconnected. And I've experienced that myself. I've sort of fought weight issues because when I was younger, I was taught to eat food when I was stressed and unhappy and disconnected, and I was given that food. So it's I know this situation very clearly, and so it's always a matter of how conscious can you be, how much can you forgive yourself, how much can you feel what's really going on, how much can you understand what you want. It's not food. You want to feel safe or loved, or you want to say something that you don't know how to say. Those are the real needs, causes. It gives us this need to eat excessively or to eat things. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember one time, years and years ago, I guess in the 70s, I'd been living in Santa Barbara, and I had been living, probably a vegan, totally vegetarian, maybe even a raw diet. And I was just very sensitive. We were kind of living in the mountains, and, it was just a very delicate life. We didn't have any stresses, and it wasn't intense. And I moved to Los Angeles because I got a job I think it was in 71 or 2 or something. I got a job at the UCLA acupuncture clinic, doing biofeedback and working as an acupuncture assistant. And within a few days, I was eating Big Macs and McDonald's because I needed something that was so dense, because I was so sensitive from living in this very delicate environment. I needed to dumb down. I needed to have my body not be so dense. Mm-hmm. And so there's lots of reasons that we eat. And, although I definitely don't recommend McDonald's, but in that time, it was medicine for me. Mm-hmm. It made me denser. Now, if I kept eating a lot of them, I would have been dense in wrong ways. But, for a short time, that worked. And then as I got used to living in L.A., I could go back to eating pretty well again. So, that was, so food is a huge topic. Maybe sometime we could just do a show on that.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking as you were talking about being vegetarian and biofeedback, which, is a really fascinating science in and of itself. You have to ask yourself this question, especially this day and age, that, when it comes to subconscious energy, if you will, how much of our happiness really comes from that point to where we really try to manage it on a conscious level? Because on the program, as we've talked about this, your conscious mind really doesn't stand a chance against the subconscious mind. It just, is sort of that gateway that rationalizes what could otherwise deem to be ridiculous behavior, especially when it comes to happiness. Why did you do that? Well, I thought it would make me happy, and then comes the rationalization. But the question is, get behind that veil and find out what the driving, motivating factor, as you talked about earlier, look into and pay attention to your body, and that we tend to look outside of ourselves too much. And clues to that is that many people, if you go onto YouTube, for instance, the most popular searches on the YouTube search engine are people trying to find ways to do things. That we can't count on ourselves anymore to find the answers or to know that we can get those answers for ourselves. What has been your experience with that?
Well, again, if we sort of put a few points together, when there is a huge gap between our consciousness and our unconsciousness, mm-hmm. You're right, our unconsciousness will win. But as we begin to have more of a sense of ourselves and actually more of a connection to our body and what we're feeling in our body, because our unconsciousness really lives in our body. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have certain conceptual ideas and so forth, but most of what we call our unconsciousness are really feelings and felt senses and habitual patterns in our physical body. So as we begin to break down that disconnection, all of a sudden, we're in a better place. There's not the gap. There's not these conflicting, thoughts. I want this, or I don't deserve that, or I shouldn't have that, or I shouldn't have that, but I want that, or this is good, this is bad. I mean, our whole political system is sort of screwed up, I think, with that kind of disconnection. Mm-hmm. So as we begin to really integrate the deeper parts of ourselves with the outer parts of ourselves, we begin to find that we're much more likely to be in the right time, in the right place, and begin to know what to do, because that's how the universe works. when we slow down and get connected to the various parts of us, we really find that we have all the guidance and wisdom and even specific information that we need. So that's another thing I talk about extensively in the book, Deep Happy.
Fascinating subject it always is when it comes to something like this. I remember as I was reading in your book, there's been one story that really stood out for me, and that was you were describing a man who was sort of adrift out on the ocean, and there seemed to be this whale that kept him company. And I was thinking, for instance, of the movie, what was it, Castaway with Tom Hanks.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, and that's the image, and you think to yourself, if you can be in touch with that part of yourself that knows that it isn't separate. And you talk about that extensively in Deep Happy, that really to me was the permeating message that resonates, that, you know, unhappiness, you know, especially that deep happy place, is that place where you know that you're interconnected with everything, that whale or that ocean or even the boat that this person was on, you know, you're all one and the same. It's a matter of just shifting your energy or having the freedom to be able to do that without being disconnected, to say, this is a boat, there's that whale, for instance. And that's a story, if you wouldn't mind, for our listeners, talk about that a little bit, because it just resonated with me for some reason.
Well, you know, it's a story about, you know, I've known several sailors that had spent extensive time in the ocean and that were having difficult time. And one of them told me a story that he'd been out alone, and all of a sudden this whale came and stayed with him until he felt better. It was a large whale. The whale sensed him, and the whale connected to him. And, you know, we have this sense we have this connection to animals. We have this connection. You know, when I'm feeling off, my dog comes and sits on my foot. You know, now that's a family member. Now, through various historic experiences I've had in my life, I have a number of power animals, rabbits, crows, a number of other things. If I'm in the wild and I'm thinking about something, one of those animals will appear. You know, we have a natural connection. In the book, I talk about, I talked to 3 hunters, you know, an Eskimo and then one American hunter and then one from Africa. And they all have this sense of being on the land and sensing the animals around them. And the animals, the American Indians talk about this, is that, you know, if people are hungry, the animals will actually come and sometimes offer their body.
Right.
And so there is this incredible interconnection of life. And when you consider there's 100 trillion cells in our body, 90% of the cells in our body are not human. They have different DNA. Now, they're very small. It's only 10 to 20% of body weight. But still, you know, the majority of cells in our body even are not even human. We carry them around. I mean, if you really look at the world, oxygen was created by bacteria. It's probable that humans are just spacesuits that bacteria created to carry them around from place to place. We are, just on the physical, natural world, we're connected. But when you look at quantum reality, when you look at the bigger reality of the infinite and the universe, you know, we think we're so small and, you know, the universe is so big, how could I possibly have any even, you know, significance with the sun and the moon and everything? And yet, size does not matter in a quantum universe. There's a bumper sticker for you. And, you know, so just like our body is connected through resonance to all the cells and all the organelles inside every cell, so are we connected to this infinite universe. And once we start to acknowledge or even test that universe to see if it's listening, it totally and completely and 100% responds. Now, if we have a disconnection inside us that says, oh, I want this, or I don't want, another part saying I don't want that, the universe is all that. So, but as we get clearer, as we get more connected, as the voice of our wants and not wants is more coherent with inside us, then the universe responds to that coherence in more and more places. Can I tell a story about that?
Yes, please.
Well, I have a story in the book, too. A number of years ago, I went to hear a couple African bands at the Jazz Festival in San Francisco, and the first one was great, the second one was kind of boring, so I went out to the lobby to just, you know, wait till the second band got better, and I started talking to this woman who turned out to be the manager of the first band. This was a band from Africa, and when she found out I was an acupuncturist, she said, oh, the boys are having malaria attacks. Could you come to the hospital the next day? So I did. The next day I came back into San Francisco, and I went to their hotel rooms, and I worked on them, and we had a great time. And so they invited me to come to Africa with them on a tour. They were playing at the Festival du Désert, which is a yearly festival in the middle of the Sahara, about 60 miles north of Timbuktu. And so anyway, I went with a friend of mine, and we had a great time. And on the way back, we decided that we would stop in Morocco. Well, we couldn't agree on where to go in Morocco. Neither of us had been there. We didn't know that much about it. So what we decided was, years before, I had met a Moroccan Sufi teacher named Sidi Amin Kostas, and we had profound connection. And he actually wanted to make me a Sufi teacher, and I just wasn't ready. But anyway, I decided we would do an experiment to find him. I didn't know what city he was in. All I knew was that he was in Morocco. So I told my friend, okay, let's do this. We'll get off the plane, we'll go to the train station, which was right next to the airport, I think it was in Marrakesh, and we'll walk around and we'll wait for somebody to tell us or ask us, oh, have you ever been to? Suggest going somewhere. And then we'll go there. And then we'll let the universe guide us to the Sufi teacher. So we did that, and after about 15 minutes of walking around the train station, this young guy came up to us and said, oh, have you ever been to Fez? It's so beautiful this time of year. So I went, no, but we're about to buy a ticket. By the way, I apologize to any Moroccans listening for my terrible Moroccan accent. And so anyway, we went and bought a ticket. We bought a first-class ticket. And I guess there were, 8 or 10 cars in the train, and each car had maybe 6 or 8 compartments. Each compartment had, 2 benches with maybe 3 people on a bench. And so we were ushered into, a car and a room in the car. And as we sat down, another very distinguished-looking Moroccan gentleman in a 3-piece suit sat down, and he was reading a book called Buddha in the Suburbs. So I thought, oh, well, I have to talk to this guy. So after a few minutes, we started talking. Fortunately, he spoke English. And after about 10 minutes, he was a professor at a college. I said, by the way, have you ever heard of a guy named Sidi Amin Kostas? He goes, Sidi, yes, of course, Kostas. He's a friend of mine. He lives in Fez. I haven't seen him in a few years. I don't have his number, but I know he lives in Fez. So I looked at my friend who I was traveling with, and we felt, wow, it took us about an hour to be on the train to the right city. We felt pretty impressed. But little did we know there was more to come. At the very next stop, a woman got on the train, sat down, got in our car, sat down right next to me. And after a few moments, started talking to the gentleman across the way. She was a young college student. And after another 10 minutes, he looked up and said, she knows Kostas. He was her advisor at the university. So of all the trains, all the cities, all the compartments on all the cars, the 2 people that knew the person we were looking for sat down right with us. And we happened to find that out. So that night we had his number and his email and his phone number. The next night he came to dinner, and because he was a mystic himself, he wasn't at all surprised on how we found it. So that's what the universe can do. There was no downside. It didn't matter if we went somewhere else. We didn't find it wasn't the end of the world. It was an experiment. It was okay. We weren't in peril, although the universe will guide you in peril. So it's okay to test the universe. It's okay to put up. I have quite a few stories like that in the book of how to test the universe. And so I think it's okay to do that. Yogananda used to leave his house and go, oh, I have 45 minutes, Lord. I need 3 rupees for the train. Again, I apologize to all Indian people speaking for that terrible accent. And he would always have it. He would always have his 3 rupees. Somebody would give it to him, or somebody would find it, something. And so he trusted the universe. It wasn't even an ego trip. He just said, hey, this is what I need. This is what I want. Please fulfill my need. And the universe would do it. So anyway, that's how the universe works. That's how we can work. That's how we can interact with the universe. And that's how we can learn to trust who we are and the magnificent and sacred place that we hold within this immense living universe that is us and that we are a part of and we are.
I just find it so fascinating that you have, especially here in America, back years ago I had the opportunity to interview a woman who had wrote a book called The Middle of Everywhere. And this, was a story. She was a psychotherapist talking about people from foreign countries who come here to the United States one of the biggest concentrations of this is a place in Nebraska. And what she was talking about was some of the difficulties that people who come from other countries to come to America have in trying to adapt and adjust, of course, with their cultural background, their traditions, and their ways of life. And they said one of the biggest obstacles that a lot of people from other countries find when they come to America is how we tend to micromanage pretty much everything we decide we want to do. And what I like about what you're talking about there is it takes it back to being simple, where you simply have a desire, okay? So you follow that desire and see where it leads you. And then from that point, you allow those things to lead you. And pretty soon, you can find at the end of the day, you look back and smile, because it was like, as I was talking about in the beginning of the show, that you find this unexpected happiness where you had desires fulfilled and then you had unexpected surprises as well. It's as though life was surrendering itself to you to say, why don't you just trust and come play with me? You just never know where I'm going to take you, but I can guarantee you won't forget it.
That's exactly right. And the more we test the universe with and it's not like, oh, is it going to do it? We just experiment. Don't even care that it's going to happen. Just experiment.
Right.
And then you'd be surprised in really good ways.
Mm-hmm. I think, serendipity is one of those things. To give you an idea, for instance, one thing that I've been showing my wife for at least the last year, I said, I feel like I'm slipping into this interesting realm because, for one thing, I get to have wonderful guests like you that kind of are those markers and reminders, because I take the work that people like yourself do and I apply it. I feel privileged to be able to sit in a seat and have a wonderful conversation with someone like you and people just like you who say, hey guys, keep it simple, do these things, and you'll really be surprised. But here's to give you an idea of what I find really amusing. One of the things I like to do at the end of the day is I might turn on a movie and then I'll work on a crossword puzzle. Okay? Now, I generally will do this with the randomness of the local newspaper, and then I'll try to tackle the New York Times, but still that gives me a little bit of trouble. But anyway, here's what's been really fascinating, is that I'll come to a clue in the crossword at a particular time that merges with something that is happening outside of me right at that particular moment. For instance, I was working on a crossword last week, and at that time I was finishing up a book which was an autobiography of Shania Twain.
Oh.
Thought I would find, because I'd heard a little bit about her life, this might be interesting, her writing about her life and how, things went with her. So here I was probably in the last 2 chapters of the book, and that night as I'm working on the crossword puzzle, it says, a Twain who has written only one book. I've never had that clue before, at a time that I'm finishing up the autobiography of Shania Twain.
There you go.
And so, but I see these things. The other night, randomly on television, the original movie Rocky was playing. And my wife had came out because this was actually earlier this week, and of all, things, this station normally doesn't play movies, especially during the week at that particular time. And she wanted to see about watching the Democratic, speeches. And
right.
So I was kind of bouncing between the two. I was watching, toward the end of Rocky. But she came in, and there was a scene where it was toward the end. He's laying in bed, and he's kind of telling Adrian how he doesn't think he can win. And while she's sitting in the living room kind of watching this with me, I was about to tell her that this movie was inspired by a real event where Muhammad Ali had actually fought a total unknown, and this unknown fighter actually went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali, which inspired the movie Rocky. And just as I was thinking this, when I was thinking about telling her this as she was in the living room, sure enough, a clue about Muhammad Ali happened to be in the crossword puzzle. So it's just those kinds of things you find so amusing, as you say, about testing the universe. Just try and see what happens. It'll play with you.
And I think what you brought up is important, because you brought up fairly mundane things.
Mm-hmm.
But most of our life, in some way, it seems mundane.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems so simple. And yet, when we really look at the miracle of life, I mean, here we're all alive because there's an 800,000-mile wide ball of fire 93 million miles away with a giant black hole inside of it that's keeping us all warm and toasty.
Mm.
I mean, that's a miracle. It's a miracle that we're all breathing. It's a miracle that water, that when it freezes, the ice, rises instead of sinks. If it sank, we wouldn't have any air in the planet. All these little things. Our whole life is such a miracle. But then when we begin to think about things that we think of mundane, they're not mundane.
No, not at all.
They're just small signs of this great interconnection. And as soon as we trust it and experiment with it and have fun with it and don't worry about it so much and just become curious about how the universe is going to get us out of this one or through that one, life becomes a lot easier. And that's when we can also find our deep happy.
Mm-hmm. And we would say to our listeners, if life got easier for you, would that be okay? I can't imagine anybody saying no, but it's possible.
We about half my practice is on the phone with people all over the country.
Uh-huh.
And I work with a lot of practitioners or a lot of people these days that say, well, I want my business to be more. I want more friends. I want a new lover. And it's amazing when they say these things that they want, sometimes their body opens and it's they're very available, but often their words and their mind is saying it, but their body is tightening because there's something about getting bigger or more spiritual or about actually opening to love or opening to intimacy or opening to success that's scary or tightening or seems overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So as we begin to go back in to notice our sensations in the body when we express longing or desire for something, again, we can put the outer together with the inner. And we can relax the body when we say we want more opportunity. And then opportunity comes. Mm-hmm. So again, it's this mixing the information in the body with our much greater cosmic view.
Mm-hmm. Now, Peter, if you could, give our listeners your website and how they can find out how to get deep happy or perhaps contact you so that they can sort of open that up and re-access that part of themselves that as adults sometimes gets buried or kind of lost.
Sure. Well, Deep Happy is available from your local bookseller. It's distributed by all the major distributors. You can also get it online from Amazon or from Barnes & Noble. It's available on ebooks, and it's available from Kindle. And you can also get it from our website at deephappylife.com. And if you go to deephappylife.com, you can find out how to, if you want to send me an email, if you have questions about the book or you want to work with me privately, I'm happy to talk to people about that. A direct phone number, which you can also find on the website, Deep Happy Life, if you don't have any way to write it down. It's 415-377-0862, and happy to talk to people and help them work through issues and problems in their life that don't seem to be changing.
Very good. The book is Deep Happy. Our guest today, Mr. Peter Fairfield. Peter, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you. If you get a chance, call me back when we're done. I'd like to talk to you.
Very much. Hold on. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Remember to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com and find your deep happiness, as we have a hot link for you on our newsletter as well. Again, thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past